girls have been with you through every moment of your life. They were with you when you felt unbreakable, and with you when you had your heart broken. They were with you when you shared your love with the world, and with you when she became your world. They're still with you right now. But how well do you know them?
Good afternoon, everyone. As Kelly said, my name is Nicole West. I bring you greetings on behalf of Mayor Jackson, Chief Natoya Walker-Minor, and all of the Department of Human Resources. Welcome to the 5th annual Breast Cancer Education and Awareness Luncheon. Let's give a round of applause for the luncheon. This is a very special day dedicated to learning, supporting, sharing, empowering, and communicating with others in our work community, those whose lives have been affected by breast cancer. We hope that this year's luncheon gives everyone the knowledge that is so very essential to deal with this disease, and that also it empowers and strengthens us to do the needed work along this journey. Today, not only are we honoring our survivors, can our survivors please stand? Thank you so much. We also want to recognize the many employees at the City of Cleveland who have family members who have been diagnosed with breast cancer. We have employees like Commissioner Brian Kimball. If you're here, please stand. And we also have Community Relations Board employee Tammy Hanna. Both of these individuals have had relatives who were diagnosed with breast cancer. If there are any other City of Cleveland employees who have had family members who were diagnosed with this disease, can you please stand and be recognized as well? We continue to believe that with knowledge comes empowerment, with community comes inspiration, and with support comes hope. We want to thank everyone who so generously shared their time, experience, and knowledge with us on this important day. It's a day of celebration. It's a day of sharing beauty, grace, and strength for all breast cancer survivors and their loved ones. We thank you very much for attending. We hope this day fills you with knowledge, enriches you, and most of all, leaves you with hope. Thank you.
This event is always one of my favorite events that we do in the City of Cleveland because it's calling out awareness, it's calling out education, it's calling out courage, it's calling out bravery, it's calling out a walk of faith. Because for those who have been directly impacted by a diagnosis, that's exactly what it is. And for those of us that have watched women and men fight this through in a battle of faith, we have saw a sense of courageousness, a willing spirit to continue to press on despite what the diagnosis may look like. And today our speaker is one of those. Dr. Melissa Burrows. She is the director. Woo, woo, woo. She is the director of the Office of Equal Opportunity. She's been with the city now for just over 5 years. But more than that, she's a friend. I didn't know her well when she came on board. I actively recruited her for the skill set, for the competency, for the compassion, for the humanity that she has as a person. And over the last 5 years, what I have saw in her leadership, her contribution to the city administration, and to those that we work with in our external environment has been nothing less than professional, nothing less than a helping hand to move forward diversity and inclusion. But 3.5 years ago, I think it was 3.5 years ago, when she received that call, that dreadful call, and after that call, she called several people. She's here today. Let's honor her mother and mother-in-law, both survivors. And she called me, and as her voice trembled, all I heard was a baseline of faith in what she said to me, how she communicated it, and what I heard through what some might have thought was fear, but all I heard is faith as she talked about that. And I encouraged her and reached out to her throughout that process and was supportive of her, and I admire her. I admire her, the person. I admire the courage that she demonstrated then, and I admire what she brings to this organization. She was so focused on her job during her recuperation period, I had to get her husband's cell phone and said, tell her do not call me or this city. This job will be here. We want a full recuperation because when she comes back, that work is here. And so I'm honored to salute her. I'm honored that you will hear from her, and I'm honored to have watched the courageous walk of faith that she demonstrated. Dr. Melissa Burrows.
Now, you know I was okay until I see my mother crying, and I'm like, ah. That's not supposed to be, right? This is a happy occasion. But let me give my thanks, and I'm going to say to you that I wrote my remarks, and as I read them, that's really not an indication that I'm not very serious about it, because I'm one of those people that I really like to spend time and think and contemplate and reflect. And this whole process, when you have a major illness, that's one of the things that you're forced to do. It slows you down. And to some extent, some people would say that that's, or at least I felt at times that was almost like a weakness, but it's not. It's just, it's a part of life, and it's part of the process that you go through. And I'm thankful to Kelly Smith. So let me just go ahead and start this process and read it, and you will understand a little bit more. So thank you for the honor to speak with you today and share my story about breast cancer. And again, before I begin, I'd like to give a special welcome to my mom, again, Effie Kendall. She's a 14-year survivor. And my mother-in-law, Gloria Burrows, she's a 10-month breast cancer survivor. Thank you, Kelly Smith, for inviting me to speak today, along with Director West and Chief Walker Minor, for allowing me the opportunity to share my breast cancer journey. And before I begin, I'd like to thank my spouse. He's not here, but that's because I really didn't invite him, but that's okay. He's very busy too. But my spouse, Grady Burrows, and it was and continues to be his faith that I rely on and have continued to rely on to make it through this process. And then finally, I'd like to thank Mayor Jackson and my OEO staff for their support. Now imagine going into the mayor's office and having to tell him that you've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Just think about that for a minute. But let me tell you that the mayor's response was, you just go do what you need to do. And so in other words, don't worry about work, you worry about you. And so I really appreciate that. Otherwise, I don't think I could have focused on me. And I'd also like to thank my OEO staff because they maintain the office with precision during my absence. And really, if I can assist one person with listening to their inner voice and scheduling either an appointment with their doctor or a mammogram, then my purpose for speaking today will be fulfilled. Don't ignore yourself. So big C, little c, which C will you be? I'd like to talk to you a little bit, and I want to give the whole process of the diagnosis, at least for me and my perspective, and how it occurred in 4 days. I'm going to tell you that there really needs to be advocacy, and if I'm saying it, that means that it needs to start with me. The process of when you first learn that you've been diagnosed until the time that you meet with the doctor is about the worst time that you can experience during this entire process. Because just think about the thoughts that go through your mind. And so I'm going to explain my process. I'm going to narrow down into 4 days. Of course, it took about 7 days, but I really want you to experience what it was like in that period of time. So day 1, Monday, February the 29th, 2016. I'm happy to report that my life began anew on actually March 30th, 2016. The day of my first surgery. The day marked a new beginning for me. In fact, every day after March 30th, 2016 marks a new day. I wake up each morning and say to myself, today is the first day of the rest of my life. When I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, I could not have made that same statement. How was I, at age 47, diagnosed with breast cancer? What makes the story even most interesting or more interesting, at least based on my perspective, is that 5 months prior to the diagnosis, in September of 2015, I had a normal mammogram. And I say normal in quotes because the paperwork stated the typical disclaimer, as many of you know. You have dense breast. You may say to yourself, at least I said to myself, self? I can't have breast cancer. I just had a normal mammogram 5 months ago. So here's my story. In January of 2016, my right breast began hurting. I didn't pay close attention to the feeling, and the feeling did not alarm me initially. Then one night, while lying in bed, I felt a lump, although my own technical term was a squiggly. It felt like a little rock that was floating around in between my breasts. I had several appointments scheduled with my internist. For 2 months, my internist and I rescheduled several appointments. Then it dawned on me, as I told myself, you really should go to the doctor's office and have that squiggly checked out. So I contacted my doctor's office and said the magical words, I feel a lump in between my breasts. Of course, the doctor's office immediately responded, and although I was able to keep my original appointment date for my annual exam, my appointment was scheduled with another doctor in the department. The appointment was Friday, February the 26th. Near the end of my appointment, I told the doctor about the lump. I didn't think much about it because, again, I had just had a mammogram. The doctor ordered another mammogram, which I was able to schedule for the following Monday. On Monday, the 29th of February, I followed my normal routine. I dropped off my son at school, and then afterwards, I went to the clinic for the mammogram. I was dressed for work, and my intent was to complete the exam and then go directly to work. This is when the sequence of events begins to get fuzzy. So here you go. I had a mammogram, I had a second mammogram, then I walked into the special waiting room. And let me just pause for a second. That special waiting room I had already been to when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and no one wants to go to the special room. And then after the second mammogram, the doctor came into the waiting room to tell me that she could see something on my film and that I would need to have a biopsy. The doctor felt the lump and told me she could perform the biopsy at 1 p.m. that very same day. Otherwise, I would have to reschedule for several days later, but there was an opening on that day. Out of shock, the only thing I could think about was making sure I was home to take my husband to the airport. I was only supposed to have one appointment at the clinic. And then my plan, again, was to go to work and then later go to council meeting in the evening. So you're not thinking rationally, right? So I first called my husband and told him that I would have to return to the clinic in the afternoon after dropping him off at the airport. I then called my mom on her cell phone, and my mother had had several appointments at the clinic that very same day. So I knew she was close to my house, and I wanted her to go to the appointment with me. So I called my mother-in-law as well and informed her of my status and asked her to pick up my younger son from school. It's a blessing now, I'm gonna stop and just tell you, it's a blessing to have two parents that can lend a helping hand. So another set of fuzzy events is that, and this is kind of a funny thing out of chaos. So after all of this occurred, now, again, I talked to my mother, called her, said we have to go, and she actually came to the house. And when she came to my house and I was telling her the news that we would have to go back to the clinic and I needed her to go with me, the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, I thought you were going to tell me that you lost your job." I'm like, no. I'm like, it's not that easy, no. So here again, fuzzy time period, right? So my mom and I dropped off my husband at the airport, then we returned to the clinic for the biopsy. And let me say that if you think a mammogram is uncomfortable, a biopsy is no joke. So again, there are funny moments in the mix of all this chaos. After all the events occurred for that day, I went home, took a nap. But the funny thing is that after waking up, I grabbed both of my cell phones, of course my city cell phone and my own personal cell phone. And I never do this, but then I also grabbed a pile of clothes. Well, you can only imagine where the pile of clothes and my cell phones went, right? They both went into the laundry and they both got washed. That's just day one in being diagnosed with breast cancer. And I promise these other ones are shorter. Day two, Tuesday, the 1st of March, 2016. Day two was the longest and the shortest day in my life, depending on the perspective. In terms of the day being the longest day, the day marked another day of waiting for the results. Cancer, cancer-free. It was difficult to maintain my emotions and appear to be normal with the thought of a life-threatening diagnosis hanging over my head. But somehow I was able to take it 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second at a time. Now that I can look back on it, day two marked the shortest day of my life because it became the last day of being cancer-free, at least from my knowing about the results. And then I do recall, again, going to the Verizon store and replacing that one of 2 cell phones. And perhaps that's another reason why the day seemed quick. Day two ends. Day three, the results, Wednesday, March 2nd, 2016. Day three was similar to day two until 3:30 p.m. And as I sat at my desk at work, my cell phone rang. The only words that mattered at the moment were, "I'm sorry to inform you, but you have breast cancer." In that split second, it took the doctor to allow the words to come out of her mouth. It took much longer for the words to sink into my brain, and much longer to acknowledge that when using those words, it was now being used to describe me. Once my brain caught up to those words, "You have breast cancer," my entire life was retraced in my head, similar to watching a movie. I was able to see my entire life in 1 minute. While still on the phone with the doctor, she informed me that a scheduler would call me the next day to arrange follow-up appointments. The first thing that happens when you receive this type of diagnosis, especially at my age, is it makes you wonder who will be there for your children and your spouse. And for me, my immediate reaction was disbelief. Second, I had a sense of hopelessness. So my oldest son had a friend whose mother had passed away the previous year from breast cancer, so he was terrified of my diagnosis and the possibility that I might lose the battle. Also, my younger son was a 3rd grader. Needless to say, 3rd graders are so young, especially having to deal with a mother that is sick. And I knew my sons understood the seriousness of this illness known as cancer. But the moment I told them was the moment I knew that no matter the circumstances, I had no other choice but to fight this battle and win the battle. Thank you. Thank you. So my mission ended up switching instantly to survivorship mode. day 3 ends. Now this is the last day, but let me explain this one. So day 4, March 3rd. On day 4, the radiologist, the same doctor that had performed the biopsy, called me to follow up on the appointments. She informed me that the scheduler would be out of the office until the following week and that she did not want me to wait until then. The follow-up conversation included 4 doctors' appointments, along with the names of each doctor. I was assigned to the chief surgeon of breast cancer at the Cleveland Clinic. And let me just give a side note here that there was a time during this conversation that the radiologist informed me when she was telling me about the diagnosis and the appointments. She asked me, she said, "Do you want a male or a female doctor?" And my immediate response was, "I want the best." Male, female, whichever, right? And it really wasn't until the following week in my first medical appointments that I was informed of the stage of my cancer, and later in the month that I would find out the health protocol. So ultimately, my first surgery was a bilateral mastectomy with expanders and reconstruction on March 30th. And the decision was made because I had 2 cancerous areas in my right breast. And the cancer had spread to my sentinel once I had surgery. We knew that the cancer had spread to my sentinel lymph node and 2 additional lymph nodes. And so ultimately, 28 of my 40 lymph nodes were removed, and I never knew that every person has a different set or number of lymph nodes. And while the left breast was free of cancer, I wanted to remove any potential issues in the future, along with having to follow the protocol of a mammogram on the left side. So the decision was made to have both breasts removed. My second surgery was to swap out the expanders and put the implants in, and that was on December 12th of the same year. And then I have a third surgery coming up this year. But additionally, I also take 2 oral medications daily, and then I receive a monthly chemo shot from then until now to the present. And so that's my story, but I really want to talk, and I'm going to move and transition, and I promise I'm going to go through these pieces fast. But I think that there are 10 things that I learned along the way relative to breast cancer, and I really think that these are, to some extent, transferable points. Anybody that faces a major illness, I think these points are applicable, and honestly, I think they're applicable in most things in our life, because we've all experienced some type of hardship, right? So the first one, realize the following, that cancer is a mindset. And the quote I'd like to have you remember is that breast cancer is a psychological emergency, not a medical emergency. So at the minute you are diagnosed, you have a choice to make. Am I going to say, woe is me? Or are you going to pick up your cards and the cards, the hand that was dealt to you, and fight this battle? It's your choice. Honestly, again, the hardest part of the process for me included asking for help and allowing others to help me. That was really hard for me. Number 2, rely on your support network once you create it. It's up to you to create this support network. Think about the layers of support that you will need. For instance, my closest family members, and 2 of them are here, were part of my inner circle, along with my 2 close friends. And then everyone else, I sort of handled them with a long-handled spoon. You don't need a lot of people around you at that point. And when my mother was sick, we had a family member who tried to, you know the deal. Everybody wants to try and get in it, right? And I told that individual at that time, if your name is not cancer, we're not dealing with it, right? You put it aside, it's not necessary. People will take you down that path. You don't need to go down that path. Number 3, attend support groups of people who've experienced the same type of cancer as you. I attended and organized a support group for 2 other, it was 1 church member and then my aunt. I had an aunt. So there were 3 of us at the same time that were diagnosed with breast cancer. And unfortunately, my aunt has passed on because of the breast cancer. But my other church member, the 3 of us would go to the gathering place for support. You don't realize how much you have to unpack until you actually sit down and start talking about it. And so I always encourage people that You've got to release it. You've got to talk to other people who've experienced that journey. And when you start talking to other people, you're like, oh, that's not so bad, right? Now, that's not necessarily saying that that's a good thing either, but you can put things in perspective when you talk to others. The next one is be here now. So stay focused on you and your healing process. The fifth one is become introverted and rely on your deep inner spirit to help you make it through the healing process. And so for me, I was and continue to find my inner peace through listening to gospel music and reading my Bible plans. Get rest. That's self-explanatory. 7, realize that you won't be the same person as you were before you were diagnosed, and it's okay. Again, this was harder for me. I had to let go and let God. I had to admit that while I'm not as strong as I was before in terms of physically, I gained the ability to see things clearer, and I slowed down, although if you ask my family members, they would tell you something otherwise. But I did slow down. Number 8, if you ask the question, why me? Don't focus on the why for too long. Ask why, and then why not me? And then don't expect to receive the answer. Uh-oh, you all. My number 9, I may not have 9. Hold on. I think I have it. Hold on. I may not have 9. It's funny because I was recycling things. That's okay. I don't have 9 and 10. But let me tell you, the one piece, here's one, and I have it with me. Keep a journal of every single appointment that you've had and make notes. I will tell you that when I wrote things down and then I would confer with my family members that were with me, sometimes I heard something that was different. And it was usually worse off than it really was. So keep a journal. I still have mine. I still make note of that. And then the last piece I just want to really say to you is that I try to walk this experience in faith. And I always tell people that I really want to try to be the type of person that walks in faith and not in fear. And that's a hard scenario, but you can't walk it in fear. Can't walk it alone. Just be at that point where you're accepting of the fact that this is a stage in life. And I will tell you, now that I'm 3.5 years out, I'm probably at peace now than I was at the very beginning of the journey, right? And you can interpret that any way you want, but it really is a walk of faith. And so finally, I want to be the big C and not the little c. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patrina Patterson. She has been with us before. She brings a lot of information from University Hospital. She's always an excellent speaker when we bring her out. She gives us what's going on in breast cancer, the research. So welcome, Patrina Patterson.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Before I go any further, and you're right, I'm all choked up too. So she did offer, Ms. Burrows had offered for me to go first, and I'm like, oh no, go ahead. No, not to do that again. But it just kind of drummed up some feelings. I too am a survivor, thriver. So it just kind of took me back to that first day, that second day, that third day, and I was kind of rethinking everything of what you were saying. I was reliving because it was so true. And definitely having your faith is the biggest thing. And I don't want to take any thunder from her, but some of the things that she said, I just really want to home in on. You need someone to record what's going on. Like she said, those fuzzy moments, never go to the physician after a diagnosis or when they think they have a diagnosis. Take someone with you, because you will not hear anything that they say, and you swore that you heard what they said, and you don't. So I had a good support team also. So do that. Make sure that you join a support group. Like she said, I'm an advocate for that. And there are several support groups in town, and it doesn't matter where you live, where a breast cancer survivor will walk with you through that whole journey. And that's something I do with one of the groups is the Pink Halos. And I'm a member of that group. And anytime someone gets a diagnosis, we call and someone will stay with that person through the entire journey of their cancer experience. So definitely do those things. Again, I'd like to thank Kelly for all that she's done. I think this is my 4th or 5th year coming. I would be remiss if I didn't thank Chief Minor and also the Director West, and also Patty that I met this year for the first time. And also over in the Clerk of Courts, I was there with Saida and also with Sonia Salim, who may be here. So I would really like to give them a big thank you in front of their bosses, because they are doing a terrific job with getting me into all the departments to talk about breast cancer. I think we can do better than that. And then last but definitely not least, I thank the mayor of this great city for allowing this to happen. It does not happen in every city. They do not let you take your time and just come on down from 12 to 2 and have a wonderful meal. And do not move my cheesecake while I'm talking, please. That was for the wait staff. You know, sometimes when you're the speaker, you come back, who took my plate? Who took my plate? But again, getting back on the serious side, and I'm gonna be a little clinical today. She spoke about dense breasts, and I get that question a lot. So if you bear with me, versus me standing up and lecturing a lot, there's at least one short video, about 7.5 minutes, that I would like to play for you. But just a few things to take home. Question: if I had $1 for every time someone asked me or said to me, you know, I had that mammogram done and it really hurt. There isn't any breast cancer in my family, so I haven't had one for a couple of years. Really? My answer to you, and I give this to every talk: you want to hurt now or you want to hurt later? So make it a spa day like I do. And especially since I'm a survivor, I know all the survivors in the room, you get kind of squeamish when it's time for that next mammogram. And I just make it a day. I take a day off. I make my appointment in the morning. And then I go to Original Pancake House. When I leave Original Pancake House, I go get a mani-pedi. When I get done with that, then I go over to, Cedar Creek Grill, and get my lunch, my rainbow trout. By then I'm full and tired, so I come home and take a nap and watch my favorite movie. So make a day out of it. But it is very hard to keep getting it done every year, especially if you're a survivor with the threat of, are they gonna find something? But you've got to get it done between Cleveland Clinic, Metro, UH, St. Vincent Charity. There's no reason why you should not be getting a mammogram if you are in between your insurances, for whatever reason. We all have funding for free mammograms. I can talk about my program the most at UH. If we see someone, and we're the only hospital that will see an undocumented person without insurance, and it's about 10 grand to take a woman through a whole day of assessments, and we spend that. One thing that we do at UH is if you come in, you do not have insurance, and you don't have an order because you do not have a medical home, Dr. Schenk will be your doctor, and he will write the order. We get a mammogram, we have you wait if we see something. If you need a diagnostic, we pay for that. If we still see something, we schedule you all in the same day. And then we will do a biopsy, I will pay for that. I not only will pay for the biopsy, I will pay for the pathologist, I will pay for every doctor that you have seen, and everything that you need, it will be covered. So there is absolutely no excuse if you're 40 years old, do not have insurance, and you need to get a mammogram, you need to see me before you leave here today. And if you do not want to come to the great UH, that's the one further up Euclid, it's okay. I will send you wherever you go, because believe it or not, we all get along in that department. I can't tell you about rheumatology or cardiology, but when it comes down to mammograms and breast health and all of the centers, we all refer back and forth to make sure that no one gets passed by. So there's absolutely no excuse, okay? All right. I'm going to show just a little bit of these slides just to give you a few statistics, and I'm going to go right into this video. And Hopefully everything will work for me. And of course I hit the wrong one. I knew which one to hit. Okay, let's go this way. So what is breast cancer? Believe it or not, is the most common type of cancer among women in this country, other than skin cancer. And these are the numbers that I want you to look at. And these numbers are on track from the American Cancer Society. This year, they estimated 260,000 new breast cancer cases, and about 2,600 men would be diagnosed with breast cancer this year. Also, out of those numbers, we're looking at about 42,000 plus women that would die of cancer this year. That's coming out of that 268,000. And about 500 men would die of breast cancer out of that 2,600. The numbers are right around 400 or 500, depending on which institution. But we're on track when we look at some of the research, and we're in the last fourth quarter now of this year. We are so close to 268 already that it's not funny, and that's national number. So it's something that happens, it's something we have to deal with, it's something we have to put our big panties on, and Fruit of the Looms for the one man in the room. You got to pull them up, because men and women do get breast cancer. I talk about men every year, but it doesn't seem to sink in too much. But men feel that they don't have breasts. They feel they have a chest. Anything with a nipple, that's a breast. I told the women over at the clerk of courts, we are mammals, so any other mammal that has a breast can have breast cancer. I was at the breast cancer walk for ACS, for American Cancer Society. 2 dogs walked by, and both of them said, I'm a survivor of breast cancer. Dogs have breasts, dogs get breast cancer. Now it's up to their owners that's going to pay for that $5,000 surgery for them to have a mammogram. But evidently they had good parents, because somebody footed that bill, because it's not covered under doggy insurance. Trust me. I've had 2 nephew dogs, and it's not covered. So it's a wonderful thing to see we even have dogs walking. So again, I said all that to say, if you have a nipple, you could have breast cancer. For my seniors in the class, once you turn 70 or 80, do not let your doctor tell you that, oh, there's no breast cancer history in the family, so you don't have to get those mammograms every year. You know, you really don't have to do that. Get another doctor. Do you still have breasts at 85? Or did they just fall off and go down Kinsman? Okay, I wish mine would sometime, but they don't. So at 87, do you still have breasts? Or did they go down Ridge Road? Okay? So, breast cancer can come anytime there is a breast. So we do have seniors. My grandmother was 73 when she found the lump. So because of that, do not let them tell you, oh, there's no breast cancer in the family. I will tell you today that most of the cancers out of that 268,000, only 20% of breast cancers are hereditary. So what's the bigger number? 80% of you fall in the 80 percentile, that you were the first one to ever have breast cancer in your family. It generally runs on the mother's side. Not always, but it generally runs on the mother's side if it's going to be hereditary. With men, it's 90% of the time hereditary. But the man may be the first one to have it in the family. With Ernie Green, that played for the Browns when we had a Super Bowl back in 1964. He had 4 siblings that were female and 1 brother. In his 70s, he found a lump under his arm, and under your arm, that's not underarm tissue, that's breast tissue under your arm. He found a lump, came to the great UH, we did a mammogram, and yes, we do male mammograms. We don't do the sharp smash and grab, but we push the paddle up against them, and they have to just stand against a wall to spread their breast out. He had everything done that a woman would have had done. But within 5 years, all 4 of his sisters then were diagnosed with breast cancer. So we don't know where it's going to hit, but it may hit. His mother unfortunately died, and we don't know. We know that she did not have breast cancer, but there was a familiar gene. So leading into that, I'm going to show you a video, and if we have time, then I'll do the video on dense breasts. And if I don't get there, then I'll tell you about dense breast and give you a little better idea of what that is, because a lot of women hear it, but you don't know what it is. And I'll tell you about the dense breast law, if Kelly will remind me, okay?
Now, as we mark Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we have an exclusive interview with Beyonce's father, Matthew Knowles. Michael, you had a chance to sit down, talked about something very personal today.
Yes, sat down with Matthew Knowles, Robin, and he opened up about being one of the thousands of men diagnosed with breast cancer every year. And I spoke to him about how he's doing now and his mission to shine light on how this disease can affect men. He's father to two of the most famous performers in the world, Solange and Beyonce, seen together here in the documentary Homecoming. As Beyonce's former manager, Matthew Knowles had a say in her name since her days in Destiny's Child. But this morning, the 67-year-old is sharing something very personal about his own life. It is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and you decided this was the right time to share some news about your health.
What I want to share, Michael, is that I also am a survivor of breast cancer.
Just 2 months ago, Knowles noticed a small recurring dot of blood on his shirt.
And then I told my wife, and she says, you know what? I saw a dot of blood on the sheets. So I immediately went to my doctor. I got a mammogram, and then it was very clear that I had breast cancer.
When you get the diagnosis that, yes, you have breast cancer, what goes through your mind?
Of all the things I could get, why would I get this? From a man's perspective, I'm thinking, why me?
Only 1% of breast cancer diagnoses are men. What have the doctors told you about your diagnosis?
So I have that BRCA2 that's mutated, which means I have 4 things to be concerned about: prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, melanoma, and breast cancer. The rest of my life, I have to be very much aware and conscious and do all of the early detection, constant mammograms, constant prostate exams, constant MRIs for the rest of my life.
Luckily, he found it early. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good, Michael. I had my surgery the last week of July, and now doing all the steps for recovery.
You go through this, but you don't go through it alone. You have a family.
Right.
So how did they handle it?
Well, the first call was to my family. That was the very first call, because this is genetics. It also means that my kids have a higher chance, a higher risk. Even my grandkids have a higher risk. And they handle it like they should. They went and got the test.
Knowles said cancer changed his outlook on life.
I stopped drinking. I wanted to just have a clean bill of health, do things, exercise, meditate. Things that used to be important, Michael, are not important to me now. Just look at the world differently.
Today, he is urging everyone to do the same, especially black men. Breast cancer is more common in black men than it is in white men. So what have you learned about the disparities when it comes to this and with race?
I learned again that the numbers we have for men on breast cancer are not adequate because we don't have enough men that come forward, that take the exam. I'm hoping by me coming here today, speaking out, letting folks know that you can survive this. But it has to be early detection, and I can't overemphasize the word early.
I had no idea about this until my brother went through it, and I thought, whoa, male breast cancer, something I never thought in my family, my brother, or anything like that, and I never really paid attention to it. And I think like most men out there, you just deal with something happening and you say, oh, I'll be fine.
I'm sorry to hear about your brother, but I hope you also stand side by side with me. I hope you go get a BRCA exam.
Well, you got me going to the doctor to get this blood test, I'll tell you that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for everybody out there who's watching. Really appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's going to help a lot of people, myself included. I mean, really sit there with him. He found his early. He said his history in imaging when he worked at Xerox really let him know the signs to look for, and then the spots of blood on the sheet and also on his shirt kind of sent him straight to the doctor for the test. And I definitely will take this test because my brother, the said, went through it as well. And it's not something we hear about a lot as men.
It's not.
And we're going to bring in somebody who can help us more with this, Dr. Jen Aston. Doc, thank you so much for being here this morning. And American Cancer Society estimates that 500 men will die from breast cancer this year. And who is most at risk? And what do we need to know as male breast cancer as opposed to women's breast
Well,
cancer?
this is why it's so important to talk about it. In terms of risk factors, we know, first of all, there are some risk factors associated with male breast cancer, like cirrhosis, a condition of the liver, something called Klinefelter syndrome, where a man has 2 X chromosomes, any man who's had previous radiation therapy to the chest, and then, of course, family history. Then you can get it when you have none of these risk factors. And the stigma, Michael, as you said, often prevents men from going to seek evaluation. It's a very pink world, and that can prevent men, unfortunately, from getting early diagnosis and therefore early treatment.
Matthew talked about this BRCA gene mutation. Tell us more about the genetic component of cancer.
Well, you know, like anything, there is a small genetic component. About 10% of male breast cancer does have a genetic component. So every man who is diagnosed with breast cancer absolutely has to be offered genetic testing. And we have to emphasize, we hear about the BRCA mutation. There are many genes, mutations that are associated with breast cancer. Those are just the 2 most common ones. But again, when you talk about a man getting genetic testing, they are less likely to do so, and underrepresented minorities even less likely. And it is so important because their offspring has a 50% chance of also having that mutation, so it doesn't just affect them.
Yeah, and that's why Matthew was bringing it up, talking about his children. Women, you know, we're told at a certain age, though it keeps fluctuating what age it is to get a mammogram. At least we're told to do that. What can men do?
Well, you know, men, because they obviously have less breast tissue, they should know their bodies. And if they feel something, because mammogram screening is not recommended for men, that's obviously something that's really, really important. In terms of being healthy, you guys, we have to remember heart disease is still the #1 killer of men and women. Yeah. So even after a diagnosis of breast cancer, the best thing you can do for your health is watch your weight, exercise, don't smoke, protect your heart. According to the American Heart Association, cancer survivors are still more likely to die of heart disease, and some types of breast cancer treatment can affect the heart. So this is about treating the whole person, not just a body part.
And like Michael's brother, my brother too, a couple of years ago, went through the same thing with breast cancer. He detected a lump and went in, and thankfully he's doing well as too. Real men wear pink.
Yeah. That's right.
You know, there's an organization,
and
I'm glad that we're bringing this up. We went pink yesterday, and it's just so good to continue the conversation.
The awareness is literally life-saving here.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Doc, thank you.
You bet.
We look at men and we look at women. And sometimes it takes someone famous to come out and say something, although we do know about Richard Roundtree, we know about George Lucas, we know about Montel Williams, but again, they haven't really been on the air or anything. And again, the myth is still there that do men really get it or it's really rare. So I'm glad Mr. Knowles took that time to come out and just refresh our memory. And like he said, with him, he has the gene. There's the breast cancer 1 and the breast cancer 2 gene that have been named as the most hereditary genes. Shortly, it's called BRCA1 and BRCA2 versus saying breast cancer gene 1 and breast cancer gene 2. So generally now, most insurances, not all, will pay to do genetic testing to see if there is a family history. But with him, since he's carrying the gene, although he's the father, and I had said earlier, most of it is passed on through the mother, but whenever there's a male, his is generally hereditary. He may carry the gene, and then all of his offspring then are at risk. So if your sister had breast cancer and you have 3 brothers, your brothers are just at risk than just your sister. So again, don't look at it with a blinder that it's a female disease. With him, he had all of his kids, they all went and got tested. Most insurances will not pay for it if there's someone without the gene in the family. You can get it done anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 to get the genetic tested. I was the only one in my family because we could not look at my grandmother because she was on my dad's side of the family, so they did not do genetic testing, just to the history of what was going on in my family. So again, if I asked for it, I probably would have had to pay a huge copay and get it done. But thankfully, no one else, from my brother, from my sister, or my mother, has not had breast cancer. Any questions so far on that? How are we doing with time, Kelly? We're good? Okay. If we have just a little bit more, then I'll talk about dense breasts, which Dr. Melissa was talking about. Dense breasts, a lot of women have. And that's one reason why we do not like to do mammograms until about the age of 40, sometimes 35 or less. And there are some occasions we do it earlier. In most women, just because the way that we're wonderfully made, after 40, be a small breast or a big breast, it's what we call density in it. When we do a mammogram, what we call density, if you can think of a big white cloud, that's what your breast looks like on a mammogram. Cancer shows up as white. So because of that, when we're looking at a dense breast, we cannot see through it, and it's hard to distinguish between, is there a cancer in there, or is it just some density in there? So because of that, then we do have new machines in every single clinic around Cleveland, Collier County, all the hospitals, called the 3D tomography machine, or tomosynthesis. This machine was developed especially for women and men, but mainly for women that have dense breasts. In May of 2014, Ohio passed a dense law, and we're the only 22nd state in the union that passed that law. Now more states are coming on where your insurance has to pay for another mammogram every 6 months because you've been diagnosed with dense breasts. And that's so we can keep an eye on that big white cloud because we can't see what's going on real good in the cloud. But with the tomo machine, or what we call 3D, it takes approximately 16 different slices, as in pictures of your breasts. Because it can take it in those small slices, then we can see through the density better than the 2D, where it's a front and a side view. And it's just mainly one big white boob, to put it nicely. So with that in mind, we recommend, if you've ever got a letter, take heed to it. Doesn't mean that you have cancer. It means that we can't see through your breast that well. So they'll have you come in. Some of you may have to pay a copay for the 3D. Even if you wait, when we first got the machine, our copay was $40 when it should have been free for all employees. And we advocated, our HR director, and we got it dismissed. So now you have a choice to get either the 2D or the 3D, and there's no copay on that if it's part of your wellness check. So you may want to. You know, little females here, you know. So, but you didn't hear that from me. I would like to come back next year. So keep that in mind with dense breasts. And again, as you get older, and that's one reason we see a lot of breast cancer with women over 50, we can see it better, number one. But also, it starts to dissipate on its own. Unfortunately, some people at 60 still have dense breasts. So it's not unusual, but it's, like I said, the way that we've been wonderfully made. I will show Dr. Plusha, who did a very short, I think it's 7 minutes also, video on showing you the difference between dense breasts and breasts that we can see all the way through, can see every little capillary and everything so that we can see and diagnose quicker if there is something going on.
Thank you to everyone who came out today. I really appreciate it. As you know, we do this every year, and every year it turns out to be a very beautiful luncheon, and I want to say thank you for everybody supporting and coming out. We have some gifts for our survivors, so if the survivors would stay, that would greatly appreciate it so we can hand out your gifts. We don't want anyone to get into trouble because we did run a little bit over. So we're going to say thank you, and thank you for coming out, and see you next year.